The call that found me. I don't want to waste either of our time, so I'll say it in a single breath and let it run until it empties me. Because the only way to tell this properly is to keep the thread unbroken and pull it through every room I lived in. Every night I failed to sleep. Every small decision that felt harmless until it didn't. And if I ever slow down, it's because the memory drags like a net and catches on things I didn't see then, but see too clearly now. It started with a call. 3 years ago. At 3:17 in the morning, my apartment was one of those end units, with a thin interior wall that kept the neighbors' lives just barely out of mine. And the air was the kind of stale city night air that smells like dust, warmed by old radiators. The phone lit up on my nightstand, and for a second, the brightness felt like a door opening in the dark, and I told myself I wouldn't answer. That unknown numbers at that hour are always trouble. But the sound of the ring wasn't quite right. It was a little muffled, like it had traveled too far to be clean, like a voice through snow. And it made something in me sit up even before my body did. And I reached out without deciding to and put the cold glass to my ear, and there was no greeting, no breathy scammer script, just a low static that behaved the way distance behaves. And under it, not behind it, inside it, a whisper shaped itself the way fog shapes around a street lamp and said, "Don't hang up in a cadence that belonged to me more than to anyone else." The way my own tongue settles on consonants when I'm too tired to perform for anyone. And I didn't speak because words would have confirmed the thing that already felt true. So I did the stupidest, bravest thing a person can do when faced with a question that can shatter them. I ended the call, and the room filled with the kind of silence that has intention, the kind where even the ticking of the pipes pauses to watch what you do next. In the morning, there was no record. My phone pretended nothing had happened. The call log as clean as a polished step, and because the human mind is built to prefer any explanation that lets the day proceed, I chose the one where I was half asleep and misread a notification, or dreamed the whole thing. I showered and dressed, and left that apartment smelling like soap and fear I wouldn't acknowledge. And for a few days it worked. I filed numbers at work and said good mornings in the elevator, and bought coffee from a woman who never looked up when she handed it over. And each night I turned my phone face down as if that could erase the side of it that receives. And then, a week later, I came home to a blinking light I didn't expect. Not on my cell, on the old plastic landline I'd never bothered to unplug when I moved in. A dull red eye winking like a heartbeat. And I laughed at myself for caring and pressed play. And my laugh died, because my voice came out of the speaker, flat and drained, and a little slowed like a tape left in a hot car. And it said the same thing. Don't hang up, nothing else. No context, no breath. Just that phrase folded over itself. And I set the handset down with the kind of care you use putting a glass ornament back where it belongs, and unplugged the phone from the wall and the wall from the phone, and dropped the whole coil of it into the trash under the sink, where a coffee filter bled through a paper towel. And I stood there with my hands on the counter until the buzzing in my ears faded enough to pretend I had acted like a rational person. That would have been the end if endings obeyed intention. But the next night, I woke at 3:17, like I had an alarm set in my blood. No ring this time, just the dim, airless glow that happens when something unpowered still remembers light. And I watched the black rectangle on the table, as if looking could keep it quiet. And in that attention I heard a smaller sound, a skeletal version of the ringtone tucked somewhere in the room, not loud enough to chart a direction, just enough to make the edges of the furniture feel a centimeter closer. And when it stopped, I thought I saw the dark shift the way heat does over asphalt, a trick of tired eyes. And I told myself so until the clock bled into morning and I sank into a shallow hour of sleep that tasted like metal. And when I poured cereal the next day and leaned on the doorway, 4 small numbers stared back at me from the wood. Not ink, not pencil, but shallow cuts scored into the frame at the height of my hip. 0317. Crisp and new. The grooves still pale, and I touched them with one finger, because that's what you do. You test the reality of a thing your life is about to orbit. And my fingertip came away with the soft grit of fresh dust, and I rinsed it off like evidence and didn't tell anyone because telling makes things real, and I wasn't ready for real. I started setting a recorder at night, because part of me still believed proof would free me. That if I could hold the sound and show it to someone, I would be ushered back into the warm administrative world, where problems have forms and case numbers. So I opened a cheap voice memo app and left my phone on the dresser, pointing at nothing in particular, and lay down and stared into the ceiling and let the black deepen around me like water filling a glass. And in the morning, I played it back with the kind of dread that keeps your thumb hovering a second longer than necessary. And there it was, the long flatness of a sleeping room, a distant creak as the building shifted, and then a swaddled static that was quieter than silence. And inside it, the voice again. Mine, but with the meat scraped off, saying, "Don't hang up," followed by a second version of me replying something I couldn't quite catch. A flawed echo in an empty church. And I scrubbed that audio back and forth until the words bruised into a shape, and I could almost convince myself the responses were nothing but the artifacts of the app compressing air. But the timestamp at the top of the screen clicked over to 3:17:00 and sat there like a judge who doesn't blink. I changed my number. I changed my lock. I changed my route to work. I told myself, change breaks patterns. and for a while the pattern bent. The call didn't come. And then it did, on a Tuesday that had done nothing to deserve it. My new phone with its new case and its new defensible optimism lit its new phrase for an old fact, unknown caller, and I answered. Not because I wanted to, but because not answering had become a kind of answering. And as soon as I lifted it, the hiss filled my ear. But this time, under the hiss, was a softer sound. Footsteps on a surface that wasn't hard enough to echo, gravel maybe, or old cinders. And the voice wasn't my own now, at least not the way I know it. It was older, lower, a version that had gone through some weather. And it said, "You left too soon." And I asked, "Who is this?" without choosing to make the shape of those words, the way you pull your hand away from heat before the pain becomes an idea. And the line went dead, and the log went blank, and the rest of the day lived with me, the way a storm does after it's passed. All the air charged with the memory of lightning. I moved because moving feels like cutting the string that ties a balloon to the curb. And in the new place, I set the bed against a different wall and bought a cheap secondhand table that could be abandoned without tears. And I told myself not to animate the phone. It's a tool. It's a box of numbers and glass and codes. It's a mirror for attention, not a hunger. But at night, I sometimes caught it looking back at me in the black, not with light, with the suggestion of a face where none belonged. The way your eyes make a person out of a coat on a hook. A survival trick that saves you from wolves until it doesn't. And for months, nothing happened. And then the quiet started behaving wrong again, getting narrow at the hour that had chosen me. I would wake not from sound, but from a sense of being regarded. The way you wake when someone stands too close to your bed. And the phone would be dark but warm, as if a hand had just left it. There's a thing that happens when you live with a small, precise fear. Long enough, the rest of your life shifts to accommodate its geometry. You learn to speak softer so you don't disturb the glass. You learn to stack your hours in a way that keeps the weight off the hairline crack. And it makes you look functional from the outside because the fear is tidy. It keeps itself to its hour, to its phrase, to its elegant choice of not appearing in public. And so I worked, I ate, I answered messages that came with names, I slept in portions, and I told no one because telling invites opinion. And opinion is the opposite of help. And then one night, I was editing audio for a client, headphones on, rain wandering across the window, a low thunder that didn't feel personal. And on the track, inside a recording of another person talking about something as ordinary as a maintenance schedule for a lobby, there was my static, soft as breath. And then, without moving my lips, I heard my name spoken the way someone says it when they are not calling you but retrieving you. And I took the headphones off and put them on the table and watched my hand stay steady because the part of me that shakes had been used up. I wish I could say I smashed the phone or fired it into a river and walked home lighter. But the truth is harder and stupider. I carried it with me because to be reachable is to be reassured you exist. And also because the idea of not being reachable made the night press too close. And I started noticing a payphone on the corner I cut across for coffee in the mornings. A relic I had never previously registered because it belonged to a city I didn't grow up in. Metal bent and stickered and the receiver cord wiry as a vine. And every time I passed it, I felt the same wrong little tug you feel when a word is on the tip of your tongue and resists. A sense that the shape of this object had more to do with me than things usually do. And I told myself, don't be romantic. Nothing means anything. And on the fifth morning I stopped and lifted the receiver because the world has rules about such gestures. And of course there was no dial tone, not even a sullen hum, just silence. And then under the silence, a low breath, and the whisper rose through it like a coin through water. Don't hang up. And I set the receiver down the way you lay a head on a pillow, and stood there until someone behind me cleared their throat as if I had been blocking a door. I researched, because research is a way to build a fence. I typed the building's address and telephone anomalies, and haunted and prank, and discovered nothing beloved by algorithms except other people's stories that read like mine, and were not mine, and buried in an archive site that looked abandoned. I found a clipping about a man who had disappeared from my street 20 years earlier, a night guard who had made one emergency call that cut off mid-sentence, the last word recorded as please, and nobody had heard from him again. And I folded that information into my life like a sharp piece of paper and told myself nothing that happened to someone else could obligate my present, and the hour came anyway. What I'm ashamed to say is that I began to look forward to it, to count the day by its approach, to measure what I ate and what I said and what I avoided against the knowledge that at 3:17 some small door would creak open and admit me to the only conversation that felt like it knew who I was. And I started answering in a whisper, even when there was no ring. Into the emptiness of my room, into the bent throat of my cupped hand. And sometimes the air would answer, and sometimes it wouldn't. And each time it didn't, I felt a little abandoned. And each time it did, I felt a little more like I had stepped off the curb and simply never hit the street. Then came the night the voice told me I had left too soon again, but elaborated in a way that changed the architecture inside my head. It said you left before you could tell me. And I asked tell you what, without shaping the words, and it said how to stop it. And I said, stop what? And there was a pause like a held breath across years, and it said the ringing. And I understood in a small stupid flash that this was not a haunting in the pretty sense, not a loop laid by a dead man for the living to trip. This was a continuity error in a life, a splice where a scene had been cut and glued to itself and left a seam, and I asked the question I had not dared. "Are you me?" And the silence that followed was not empty. It was respectful. And then the whisper said, "I am the part that picked up and stayed." If you think that answered anything, you have not lived with an answer that spawns more questions than darkness ever did. Because now I lay awake, not waiting for a ghost, but for a version of myself I could neither own nor forgive. And I began to test the hour, to sit upright at 3:10 and breathe evenly, and watch the second hand and pick up before the ring could be born, and ask, "What do you want?" Not aloud. And the reply slid into me like a key. It said to finish, and the word felt like a door shutting where I expected one to open. And I asked, "Finish what?" And it said, "The call." And the more I resisted, the clearer the shape of the request became. And the clearer it became, the less room there was to pretend I was sane under a normal definition. And you must understand that sanity is not a thing you hold. It is a contract between you and others about what will be ignored. I made a plan the way you plan a confession, to stay on the line, to not hang up at 3:17, to let the call run until it ran out of itself, or me, whichever ended first. And on the appointed night, I drank water and turned off every appliance that could pretend to be a light, and sat on the floor with my back against the bed, so that if something moved behind me, it would have to crush me to do it. And when the hour rolled its thin wheel up the wall, the phone didn't ring, because it didn't have to. It only warmed in my hand like an animal deciding not to bite. And the hiss was there immediately. And then the breath. And then the voice that belonged to me. If you stripped away the parts other people recognize. And I didn't say hello, I only kept the line. And it spoke in a long, slow sentence that was mostly pauses. It told me not to answer when the second call came. Not tonight, another night. And not to unplug the line because unplugging reroutes. And not to throw the device away because throwing binds. And to write the numbers where I would see them because forgetting is the same as falling. And to leave the door open between the kitchen and the hall because closed doors collect sound that pretends to be silence, and that's how it crosses. And to listen to the end, to hold the dead air like a bowl and not rush to fill it with my voice, because the thing that waits to be said at the end is the thing that stops the ringing. I did as I was told, because instruction is a relief after too much choice. And when the next night bloomed its exact flower, I let it. I sat with the phone like a patient sits with a machine that measures the heart, not touching it, allowing it to be the throat between us. And the second call came as promised. I knew it without the ring, the way you know when someone is about to knock before the knuckles touch wood. And I did not answer, and the hiss swelled like a crowd inhaling before a verdict, and then thinned the way a wave thins when it surrenders to sand. And underneath, beneath everything, there was a minute of nothing so complete I could taste metal. And after that minute, the voice that sounds like mine after a long illness said, "Thank you," in a way that did not ask to be replied to. And the silence after that was not empty. It was done. For a month I slept unbroken. I forgot the hour the way you forget a former address. It exists, but does not call your name. And then, because the world is a circle drawn by a shaking hand, I woke one night to the faintest vibration in the bones of the building. Not a ring, not a step. More the sense that something had touched the city, and the touch had rippled out. And my phone was on the floor, where it had slid. And on the dark screen, the time shone like an old scar. And a line of text I did not set lay where the notifications go. Call returned. And I understood two incompatible things at once. That the call was over, and that it is never over. That what you finish becomes the shape of what you are inside. And I realized the voice that had asked me not to hang up had never been a stranger, and had not been a future or a past. It had been the part of me that refuses dead endings, and it had learned to call because I had taught it the number by hiding from it. I still pass the payphone on the corner because it is still there. And some mornings the receiver sits slightly crooked, as if a hand that looks like mine has just set it down. And some nights I wake without a reason, and the room feels like it was full of people a moment ago, and is emptied with the sound you hear when a crowd quits a theater. And when I can't bear the smallness of my thoughts, I walk to the kitchen and stand in the doorway I keep open, because open is what stopped it. And I listen to the end, and it is only the refrigerator and a truck on the avenue, and my own circulation, and something else that could be wind, and could be the memory of wind. And I count to 60, and then to 60 again, like a child learning time. And sometimes between one breath and the next, I hear a phrase almost shape itself. Not a command, not a warning, only an agreement with a thing already decided. And I do not answer, because answering would start the shape over. And I do not hang up because there is nothing to hang up. There is only the long, continuous thread of a life tugged once at 3:17 by a voice that wanted me to learn what attention is. If you need an ending, then take this one. That there are calls and there are returns. That some numbers live in the wood of a door and some numbers live in your blood. That I moved twice and changed everything I could name. And the thing that mattered changed only when I did not. And when people ask me why I don't pick up unknown numbers, I shrug because there's no way to tell this in a way that fits into a laugh without losing what it means. And when the city goes quiet, the way an animal goes quiet when it scents something it can't see. I lie on my side and put my hand on the space where the phone used to live, and I imagine picking it up and saying nothing, and listening until the end of the end. And on those nights, the silence is kind to me and holds. And on other nights, it isn't. And I wake with the word please in my mouth like a coin. And I get up and drink water and stare at the doorway and wait for the hour to pass as if hours were weather and obedience were shelter. And usually it is. And when it isn't, I remind myself I finished what I started by letting it finish me a little. And that the only reason I'm still here to say this in one unbroken strand is that I finally learned the shape of not hanging up, which is the same as the shape of listening, which is the same as the shape of staying. And if you think this is superstition, then I hope you are never taught otherwise. And if you hear a phone ring at an hour with a name, an hour that arrives like a question mark, I hope you do what must be done, which might be to answer and might be to wait. And if a voice that sounds like your own asks you not to hang up, hear me clearly now. It is not begging, it is not command. It is the part of you that knows where the seam is, asking you to touch it once, lightly, and feel that the cloth is one piece, even where it was torn and mended and torn again, and to hold it in your hands until the ringing becomes part of the quiet, and the quiet becomes part of you. And when you can do that, the call will end in a way that ends nothing, and you will live not bravely and not fearfully but attentively, and that's the only protection I can offer, the only ending I can afford, that the night still has its hour, and the city still forgets itself, and the traffic lights still blink to no one, and I'm still awake. But the voice is not outside anymore. It lives where breath does. And when it speaks, it says nothing new. Only the sentence I mistook for a trap. The one that taught me time. Don't hang up. And now I know it means stay. If you're still watching this, maybe you've had something strange happen to you too. Have you ever gotten a call? Or heard a sound that didn't come from where you expected it to? Tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Some calls never really end.